Unfortunately, we are going to be returning back to the Apex for another UFC event, but in my opinion, I think that this card could be quite good. Now, on paper, I actually do think that it is quite good. I think that when I was looking at it in the past, maybe I was thinking that it wasn't very good, and now that we have just had last weekend's card, which I will admit was absolutely awful, I think that now I look at this one with a much more positive light, and my expectations for this card have increased, because I just don't think that the UFC is going to have two duds back to back. And if you do actually look at this card, it's a pretty good card. I mean, the name value is pretty good, I would say, in general. But on top of that, the fighters on this card, a lot of them are kind of like guaranteed bangers. I mean, Robert Valentin's going to bring it every time. Josh Hokit is a pretty interesting character in the world of heavyweight MMA. Yanez versus Quinonez is on this card. Hyder Amil is like Trevor Peak, but at 145. Marco Tulio is fun. I mean, Bonfim versus Padilla has the chance to be fun. I think kind of everything else really on this main card is a very good card for an Apex card, in my opinion. And I think that we could get a potential for a lot of finishes, which we just were starved of last week. And I will say, speaking of last week, it was an interesting card. I did go 10-3 on my predictions for that card, which I will say is pretty good. But I do think that I was the victim of a pretty controversial situation in the co-main event, but I was the beneficiary of another controversial situation, which I think that I'm going to address in full on my second channel, which is called Artem at Home. It nearly has 100 subscribers, so please go subscribe to Artem at Home, and I will be a bit more active on that channel over the summer, because as you guys do know, I'm in the middle of exams right now, which is why I didn't do a video yesterday. I was just exhausted, to be honest with you, preparing for 2 more exams. I've got one on Tuesday and then one on Thursday, and they are my most difficult one. It's hydrology and hydraulics, and then the other one is on reinforced concrete, which is part of my structural engineering course. But I guess I will probably talk about those another week, because I know that you guys don't really care about any of that. Before I do get into it, though, if you did want to support my channel, I know that I'm not doing anything on there at the moment because I have just been quite busy, but there are some really good regional cards coming up over December, which I will be covering on We Want Picks. If you do sign up, it is $10 per month, but you get 10% off that first membership if you do use my code ARTEM, and it does support my channel quite a lot, and you do get access to everything else that is on that website. Of course, if you have watched We Want Picks on YouTube before, I'm sure Angelo has talked about it for half an hour every single video for the last 2.5 years, so you probably know what the spiel is. The first fight on the Tapology belt order is Robert Valentin versus Jackson McVey, and I am going to be picking Robert Valentin to win this fight. He is minus 170. Looks like money is going to be coming in on him. Honestly, I don't really know how I feel about money coming in on the Valentin side, just given the fact that this is a very low confidence pick, and it's very volatile, because these guys are both finishers. These guys are both people that I think have the potential to get finished. Robert Valentin has kind of shown in his UFC career a little bit of a lack of wrestling at defense, and then even against Gautier, he did just end up getting knocked out in the first round, which does happen if you do fight against Gautier, but he's taken on Jackson McVey, and I will be honest with you guys, I just think that Jackson McVey's a little bit too not prepared for the UFC. I think that you can really compare him to someone like Nick Klein, or even you could go out there and compare him to like Zach Reese, but just like a little bit of a lower sort of prepared version of those guys. He lost to Bruno Ferreira in the first round. You watch his other fights, he's a very aggressive Muay Thai striker, but he just lacks a lot of striking defense, which I really don't like when you have taken on a Valentin, who, yes, Valentin does have a lot of holes in his game. I just think that the aggressiveness of Valentin is going to overwhelm the very poor striking defense in Jackson McVey's game, and I think he's just going to hurt him on the feet. So I'm picking Valentin by knockout. Maybe you could pick McVey because McVey is a grappler. That is what he wants to do, but I just haven't. That's the thing as well. I'm just not too sure, despite Valentin's terrible takedown defense, if McVey's going to even be able to take down Valentin, so I'm going to be picking Valentin by knockout. A fight which I can nearly guarantee will probably be on a little bit later on in the card is going to be Daniel Marcos versus Miles Johns. Miles Johns, I say it every single time, he just is a confusing fighter to me. I just don't really ever have good reads on Miles Johns fights, because he fights with a different game plan. Nearly every single fight, he will either be a very, very aggressive wrestler. I think it's his fight against like Vince Morales. He got like 9 takedowns in, which is just ridiculous. And then he just gave up on the wrestling altogether. And he just become a little bit of a low volume, high power striker. And that hasn't really worked out for him because he's been losing to guys that have been able to mix in volume and also the occasional takedown threat as well, as Jones has kind of been doing his thing. And he's taken on Daniel Marcos, who I would say is just a striker. I don't really think that Daniel Marcos has like any sort of level of grappling game plan that's going to be able to really affect Miles Johns in the fight necessarily. But I think that Marcos is a much better striker. Marcos is a guy I have been trying to fade for a very long time, and I did finally do it against Montel Jackson. And I do just think that now that he's lost to Jackson, I think that's probably going to be a good thing because that was a very close fight, and I think Jackson is quite good despite him looking terrible against Figgy. I think we are going to see Marcos go out there and just be the better, more high volume striker, and I think he's going to beat Miles Johns the same way that people have been able to beat him in the past, which is just by doing more on the feet. So giving Marcos by decision. The odds on this fight are -175 for Marcos, which I think is a pretty good offer there. But I will say the finishing potential probably is on the John side. Now we have Tecia Pennington as she does fight against Denise Gomes. I really like Tecia Pennington as a fighter. I have actually been a fan of hers for quite a while. I think that she's a very fun, very high volume striker. The problem with her, especially when you look at this fight in particular against Gomes, is she just has no finishing potential really at all. And that is why I think that she has been on the receiving end of some pretty bad decisions, which I very strongly believe she actually beat Tabitha Ricci. And I think that the Dern fight was very close, but you could also argue that she beat Mackenzie Dern, who is just the champion of the division right now, by the way. So maybe if Pennington can wrap up like a few wins in a row, you could see that rematch maybe later on in the line if Dern is still the champion. But Denise Gomes is the young up-and-coming fighter. Gomes is another fighter which I do believe that I have a decent enough read on because she's a very aggressive striker. Recently, we have been seeing her mix in a bit of wrestling, which has been quite interesting, but I think for the most part, she really is just trying to be very aggressive, come forward and land her big, powerful strikes in the pocket. And I think it could be quite an interesting sort of clash of styles here because it is going to be 2 strikers, in my opinion. I think this fight is going to take place on the feet. But I think that Pennington's just going to be a little bit too good. Maybe you just see Pennington just kind of do the same thing that I was talking about in the last fight and just throw more volume, land more volume, and kind of deal with the pressure. So I am picking Pennington by decision in this fight. I think that Gomes is quite a popular pick, which I do understand because Gomes is a fighter that has been developing very fast in the UFC. But I'm going to go with the veteran. I'm going to go with Pennington. Pennington is a fighter that I do believe if there was a women's atomweight division, we would see Tecia Pennington be the champion of that division, and it seems like there could be some potential for that to happen in the future, as apparently Dana White is quite interested in Seika Izawa, who's like 17-0 at women's atomweight over at, I believe she's fighting for Ryzen or Dream right now, one of the two. Anyway, I'm picking Pennington. I'm picking Pennington by decision, and she is, of course, the underdog at +155 right now. And now we have Josh Hokit taking on Max Gimenis. I'll be honest, I am not really a big fan of Josh Hokit. I think that he is trying way too hard to be like a more extreme version of Colby Covington, and this is actually hilarious matchmaking as well, because when Josh Hokit won on the Contender Series, he started just talking shit about Brazil for some reason, and then the UFC has gone and signed this Brazilian BJJ guy to fight against Josh Hokit. So I think the UFC knows what they're doing here. I think they're just going to be trying to build up Josh Hokit as this very sort of extremist personality, like the next Colby Covington, except I just think that he forces it too much. I think that he's quite cringe. I mean, I don't really have that much great things to say about his personality, to be honest, so we'll just talk about the fighting. His striking's decent, but I don't think it's like that good. The thing about Hokit is he actually is a fighter that I have followed for a very long period of time. In fact, of course, actually since the start of his MMA career, which wasn't even that long ago, but when he did fight for Bellator, this was a guy that Bellator was clearly trying to build up. And you can kind of tell that he does have a bit of talent. He is a former NFL player, NFL, maybe college football, I don't know, player. And you can tell that he's pretty good. He's got some sort of wrestling base too. and his striking, it's not good, but it is very competent, and it's probably good enough to get him pretty far in the UFC's heavyweight division. And once he does get his takedowns, he's very dominant with control, and he's got very good ground and pound. He's taken on Max Gimenis, who is actually a BJJ guy with a lot of knockouts in his UFC career. He's just been fighting absolute cans. To be honest, I don't really know what else to say aside from that. He just hasn't been fighting good guys. He's got a BJJ background. He's competed at the World Championships before. Looks like he might even have a junior world championship behind him. I didn't actually look into him all that far because when I was watching the MMA, I was like, I just don't think this guy's like that good. And I do honestly think that this is a setup fight for Josh Hokit. So Josh Hokit can get on the mic, call out Brazil again, and we're just going to get the same shit again after his win. I'm picking Hokit by ground and pound knockout, and I think he gets it done in the first or the second round. Mayra Bueno Silva fights against Jacqueline at Cavalcanti. This is interesting because Bueno Silva wasn't that long ago where Bueno Silva was nearly at the top of the world, right? She was getting pretty big wins. She submitted Holly Holm with that guillotine, I believe it was. And then she did fail that drug test, but apparently it was for, I think she claimed it was for like ADHD or something along those lines. And then kind of ever since then, we've just seen loss after loss after loss. And I think now maybe it is time for the next fighter to step up, which could be Jacqueline Cavalcanti, who I think has shown to have a very good skill set in the UFC. She's got pretty good striking. She beat Nora Cornole, who, you know, isn't that bad at fighting, really. And I do just think we are probably going to see Cavalcanti go out there and find some success on the feet against Mayra Bueno Silva. The thing about this fight that I really don't like, though, is Cavalcanti is minus 250. I think that Mayra Bueno Silva at plus 200 could be like pretty good odds. The thing about Mayra, though, is I just can't really trust her. I think that her cardio is a little bit gone. I mean, I know that she does have a very good submission ability, but, you know, we just haven't really seen that level of grappling recently out of her. Cavalcanti seems to, despite not really fighting anyone that good recently, be able to keep the fight on the feet. And if she does, I do think that Cavalcanti does have a pretty good striking advantage in this matchup. So, despite this being a very low confidence pick, I am picking Cavalcanti to win by decision, but I will say at plus 200, Mayra Bueno Silva might not be a bad bet, but it is women's MMA. Women's MMA is always quite volatile, but I do just think that these odds are a little bit wide, in my opinion, just kind of given the experience against much better competition on that Silva side. Adrian Yanez takes on against Christian Quinonez. I got there eventually. This is another classic Adrian Yanez gimme fight. The thing about Yanez, and I was saying this even when he was actually on his crazy win streak, and I picked Rob Font to... Did I pick Rob Font to beat him? I don't think I did, actually. I need to go back and look at the tapes and see if I was actually correct about that fight, but I do remember still being very critical about Adrian Yanez on his way up. The round one against Randy Costa is one of the biggest red flags you could ever see. I thought he lost to Davy Grant. And then kind of since then, we've seen him lose against guys that are pretty good. And then when he loses, they just give him absolute cans so he can build up his name again. Because why was this sanctioned? This is an insane matchup that they did. And I do think that once again, we're going to see Adrian Yanez go up there and just knock someone out that just doesn't have the level of striking defense to keep up with him. Christian Quinonez got knocked out by Kyung Ho Kang. He didn't get knocked out by Kyung Ho Kang. He got submitted by Kyung Ho Kang, but he got knocked down by Kyung Ho Kang before that KO did happen. And I do just think that in this matchup, we're going to see the same sort of thing again, where Quinonez is going to be aggressive. He's going to be trying to throw down. But I just, once again, don't believe he has the striking defense to keep up with Adrian Yanez's pretty good boxing. Now, Adrian Yanez has his own sort of levels of striking defense problems, but I don't think that someone like Quinonez is the guy to kind of pick him apart. It genuinely is someone with a very high-level skill set like Daniel Marquez, or even like someone like Felipe Lima. That's not a well-aging take at all, is it? But someone that has really good striking that can kind of crack Yanez. I just don't think that it's Quinonez. I think Yanez is going to knock him out. I think he's going to knock him out in the first round, to be honest with you. And now Jamall Emmers takes on Hyder Amil, and this is a very intriguing fight because Emmers has been on a little bit of a run recently, win-loss, but he has been beating decent opponents like the win over Gabriel Miranda in the first round. Very impressive. Knocked out Bazooka in 1 minute. Beat Hussein Eskabov. And, in my opinion, I thought he beat Jack Jenkins, and it does seem like right now the judges are now starting to finally start to award damage over anything. And Hyder Amil, he got caught by his own sort of little tactics. You know, he went out there like he did against Young Lee, and he threw down. He tried to stand and he tried to bang, but he got caught by Delgado by trying to stand and bang. And that is what Amil wants to do. I genuinely think that this guy fights like the featherweight Trevor Peak. He is so fun to watch. He comes forward. He's very aggressive. I will say, in the fight against William Gomes, he was probably just a little bit more controlled as he was against someone like Young Lee, where they just threw down. They threw down against Delgado. These fights didn't last long for him, win or lose, but they were fun. And I think that Jamall Emmers, and I am going to make this comparison, kind of does remind me in a fight style of like William Gomes here, but I do think that we're going to be able to see Amil go out there and effectively pressure Jamall Emmers. I think we are going to see him put Emmers on the back foot, and I think he's going to be able to find success in that situation. Jamall Emmers, of course, does fight very well from range. He can do some wrestling, but I just think that Amil, we've seen him show good takedown defense on the Contender Series against Emre Sonmez. We're showing that he can push a hard pace. You know, he had a pretty tough fight against Sonmez in that fight. That was a pretty good sort of wrestling exchange, and he showed that he can have that 15 minutes of cardio, and he showed he can go 15 minutes against William Gomes, and that win has aged quite well because Gomes is coming off a pretty good win in his own right against that guy they signed from Poland, whose name, it wasn't Sebastian Prispers. Was it like Powell? His name has slipped my mind in the moment. I do apologize. But Amil's minus 140. I think he does go out there. I think he does beat Emmers. It's hard to tell if he's going to knock him out because that's the thing about Amil fights. It really can be KO or decision. But I think that Marco Tulio goes out there and I think he does beat Christian Leroy Duncan. Marco Tulio was a guy that I wasn't all that impressed by on the Contender Series because if you watch his Contender Series fight against Yusri Belgari, if you watch his fight against Matteo Dagos only, he is just going out there and all he's trying to do is knock him out. Like, he has no sort of setups. He's just throwing overhands. He's really trying to get that big highlight because he fought and he beat Belgari and he didn't get the contract. And I think he should have got the contract from that performance, in my opinion. But he went out there against Duclos and he just went out there and he's just throwing down. He was desperately trying to get the KO so he could get that contract. And then he started to fight a little bit smarter now that he's actually already in the UFC. And I think that's going to work against someone like CLD, who I just think tries to do a little bit too much at 185 pounds. Like, 185 pounds is a very low-level division. You do not need to be doing spinning wheel kicks, Christian Leroy Duncan. These guys don't know how to defend leg kicks. A lot of them probably won't even react to a body kick and try and turn it into a takedown. So you can just kind of calm down a little bit, CLD, and stick to the basics, because that is how CLD has been losing in the past, by just trying to do way too much when you don't need to do that much at 185 pounds. None of these guys have that much skill compared to guys at 170 and below. With that being said, though, I think that he is a very athletic striker. I think that he does have very good speed. Of course, on the regional scene, he beat Jati Milan. That was kind of his big sort of come-up story. That's how I found out about him. And Jati Milan, where are you? Where are you, Jati? I think he actually might have retired, which does suck. But I think that Marco Tulio is going to go out there. He's just going to go out there and he's going to pressure. He's going to throw down. And I do think that he's going to be in Christian Leroy Duncan's face. And the thing that I like about Marco Tulio, especially in this fight, is Marco Tulio can grapple. And I think that's what he needs to do to beat Christian Leroy Duncan. So I am going to be picking Marco Tulio to go out there and get the grappling going, man. I don't know if he's going to get the KO, but I think he's definitely going to be working for some sort of finish, whether it is on the feet or on the ground. I think I think if it goes the distance, I think Duncan might be able to like take over in round 2 or 3, maybe. But I think that I'm going to go with Tulio. I'm definitely picking Tulio as a pick. As a prop, very hard to tell. Maybe Tulio by sub could be a very, very sneaky investigation, I think. Ricky Simone is going to be taking on Raoni Barcelos. This is one that I was really thinking about for a very long period of time. Because when I first saw this fight made, I was like, I think Raoni Barcelos is going to win it. And now I've been thinking, right? Ricky Simone striking at 135 pounds. It's not amazing, but it's very, very effective. He did knock out Javid Basharat with it, and then he did beat Cameron Smotherman as well, but that was a lot of wrestling, to be fair. And the thing about Simone, is he has had really bad performances. But when you look at it, these bad performances are against very good fighters. I mean, the loss to Song Yadong at the time, it wasn't like a bad loss necessarily, but you know, it was like an, oh man, like maybe Ricky Simone isn't going to be as good as we all thought he would. And then he lost to Mario Batista. And Mario Batista at that time, no one really held that much of an opinion of him. And he just went out there against Umar Nurmagomedov and had a relatively competitive fight. And Vinicius Oliveira looks like he could be a nightmare matchup for some guys at the top of the division right now. So these losses are not bad losses at all. Knocking out Javid Basharat did everyone a favor because Javid is he's just incredibly frustrating, to be honest with you. He beat Smotherman. Smotherman fought him on short notice. It is what it is. I think against Raoni, man, I think Ricky Simone has the level of wrestling to hang in there with Raoni Barcelos, who's nearly 39 years old right now. And I think that Ricky Simone's striking has been looking a bit better recently because he has just kind of been running forward with his chin way up in the air and kind of pulling off the Juliana Pena, I would say. I don't think he does that really anymore. And Raoni Barcelos' wins, he did beat Cody, but you know, it's really sad. He beat Payson Talbot, but it's also really sad. I just think that Ricky Simone, I think Ricky Simone beats this version of Cody Garbrandt. I think Ricky Simone beats that version, the version that Barcelos fought against Talbot as well. I'm going to be picking Simone, man. I think he's just a bit more well-rounded at this point in his career. And this is an interesting one because Chris Padilla is a really good dog. He's a really, really good dog. And I will say this about Chris Padilla as well. I have been wrong about Chris Padilla so many times. I picked Jai Herbert to beat him. I picked Hummus. I think I'm 0-3 on Chris Padilla picks, by the way. I'm pretty confident I picked him to lose all of his fights in the UFC. So I actually think I'm 0-3 on Chris Padilla picks. So maybe you just need to disregard this breakdown because I'm going to pick Ismael Bonfim, man. I actually really do like Bonfim. I think he's a really talented guy. This is a guy that I was aware of before he fought in the Contender Series. I picked him to beat Nariman Abasov, which was probably one of the highlights of my YouTube career, I guess you could say it, because at that time I'd only been doing YouTube for what, like a year? And I remember on Twitter, dude, people were saying that Abasov should have been like a -400 favorite in this fight. And you know, if you did the tape study, the fight wasn't that close, and Ismael Bonfim got it done. And I was very happy about that, but it kind of seems like in the UFC, that level of ability that I thought he had hasn't really translated over all that well, because this guy does have a professional boxing background. He's got a professional boxing record. I think it's Gabriel, though, that actually held the national title in professional boxing, but he's got an amateur record as well. His boxing's elite. The striking's pretty good. The grappling's a bit average. Is definitely his brother is the better grappler of the two, but I still just think that against Chris Padilla, who is a very gritty, tough sort of brawler, very well-rounded skill set with wrestling and grappling, I just kind of like that slickness of the boxing he's going to possess on the feet. And I think you can make an incredibly good argument for Chris Padilla to win this fight, just given the style that he does have, the wrestling ability that he does have, and the fact that he's going to be very hard to finish because he's a tough, tough dude out there. But I really, really believe in Ismael Bonfim, and I know that's not a really great reason to pick him to win a fight, especially when he's -200. I think that could be a bit wide. Even as a Bonfim believer, I think we're going to see Bonfim go out there and have a good performance on the feet with his boxing. I think he's going to outbox the boxer Chris Padilla in this matchup. And now Muslim Salikhov fights against Uros Medic. And I do know that Bitsam is quite high on Muslim Salikhov, and I can understand why, because Uros Medic's chin, concerning. Definitely a concern at this point in Uros Medic's career. Just got knocked out by Pillow Hands Punahali in the first 30 seconds. Got hurt, got submitted by Midabik Urubai. I lost to Jalen Turner. He did get dropped in that fight, but, you know, Jalen Turner at that time was very much up and coming and was just putting people away. So I don't really find too much sadness in that matchup. But these ones here, just the fact that he's getting knocked out by Pillow Hands Punahali in the big 2024. In the big 2025, he got knocked out by Pillow Hands Punahali. Oh my god, Uros Medic, what are we doing, bro? And he is from Alaska, which is a red flag, even though he has been in the UFC for years now. Muslim Salikhov, of course, the king of Kung Fu. I think he was a Kung Fu world champion back in like 1977. very, very long time ago. And he's looked good in the UFC. He's got good wins, but I just think on it, he knocked out Carlos Leal, which is good because Leal, the back knee, the shoulders, the traps, the acne, Leal. You're in your mid-30s. Where's this acne come from, brother? Oh, he probably did the division a favor in that one, to be honest with you. But I do just think... No. What am I thinking about? I think that Muslim Salikhov knocks him out. Screw it, then. Honestly, I was actually going to pick Uros Medit. This is one of those fights as well, by the way, which I changed my prediction during the recording of the video, and then all of a sudden Medic is going to win. I'm siding with Bitsam. Bitsam's underdog of the week. Hopefully I didn't leak that, but let's go with Salikhov. I'm going to be picking Salikhov to win this fight. Let's go. Let's get another dog on the board because I know I'm not picking the dog. And that's fine. I love Matt Schnell, but I think Joseph Morales is quite good. And despite me still really thinking he lost this fight, the win over Emmanuel Rodriguez has aged quite well because Rodriguez just had an incredible performance on Dana White's Contender Series against Roque Cornechea, Roque Jr., who is a very good fighter. And I know that he knocked him out in the first round. Trust me, this Roque guy, he's legit. He's a very, very talented guy. But Joseph Morales has the win over her. Yes, I did just try and drink from a drink bottle without the lid open. Joseph Morales does have a win over him on paper, even though I do think he probably lost the fight. But hey. And then he went out there against Alabi Adiras. I picked Alabi Adiras in that fight. Dominated him. Start to finish. Beat him up on the feet. Beat him up on the ground. Incredible win for Joseph Morales in that fight. And I do just think if he can keep that momentum coming again. I know Matt Schnell's a grappler for the most part. I think Morales can find success on the feet and maybe even find some of that success on the ground as well. Who Schnell is coming off a victory over is Jimmy Flick. He went to war with Jimmy Flick on the feet. Do you need me to say that again? He ain't going to be standing and banging with Joseph Morales and still have consciousness at the end of the matchup. I'm picking Morales by finish. Could be by knockout, could be by sub. It's a fun fight, though. This is a guaranteed banger. I feel like this whole main card is like a guaranteed banger. Maybe Simone versus Barcelos won't be a banger because there probably will be a lot of wrestling, but this is a good card, man. I think that, honestly, this is a pretty fun main event to top it off because Randy Brown's very, very deserving of an opportunity like this. I don't know where Bonfim actually sits in the UFC's rankings because they've removed the UFC rankings aspect from their website for some reason, but Randy Brown, he has been on a very good streak recently. He lost to JDM, who's now the champion of the division, and since then went on a win streak, including a win over Muslim Salikhov by knockout. Arguably beat Brian Battle, and I think that honestly you could even argue I was going to say you could argue that he lost to Chaos Williams, but that is not a good argument for picking Randy Brown in a fight, is it? But I do think that Gabriel Bonfim, yes, I think, you probably should have scored that fight to Wonder Boy. And this is like, I want to say it's kind of similar, but Randy Brown and Wonder Boy don't fight in similar ways. The only thing that's similar about Randy Brown and Wonder Boy is the fact that both of them want to be on the back foot and both of them do fight from rangy attacks. Whereas with Randy Brown, it's a lot more with the jab. With Wonder Boy, it's very much the leg kicks, the push kicks. I guess you could even call them the front kicks, but he doesn't really flick those up all that often, does Wonder Boy. But in the same sort of aspect, Bonfim is going to have to deal with someone that is going to be trying to strike from range. And that is something that he didn't really deal with all that well against Wonder Boy because he just tried to close the distance, clinch up, and just make the fight really boring. And he did succeed in doing that. The fight wasn't good. He won a split decision. It is what it is. But before that, he subbed Chaos Williams, which is a good win. He beat Angelusa. Decent win. Really bad loss to Dalby, who's also a karate guy, honestly, which is probably why people were picking Wonder Boy in that fight, but have I even said my pick yet? I am picking Bonfim, by the way, because I think that I always have a disastrous breakdown. You could argue that the Salikhov fight was my disastrous break. I think it's going to be this one, because I just cannot make things happen today. I think Bonfim wins, guys. I really am struggling to justify it, though, I will admit. But when I do look at who Randy Brown has lost to in the past, it is guys that can hit hard enough to give him respect on the feet. And I know that Bonfim looked like a bitch against Wonder Boy. I'm just going to put it how it is. He looked like a bitch against Dalby. I'm going to say how it is. Bonfim still has that professional and amateur boxing background with the national title in professional boxing in Brazil. So He can box, he can strike, he does like to throw down a little bit. Did it against Munir Aziz, the great Munir Aziz, who got signed to the UFC as well, by the way, because Dana White's son was hosting a party, and then just one of Dana White's son's mates goes up to Dana White and shows him Munir Aziz highlights, and that's how he got signed to the promotion. God, I actually have MMA-tism. Why do I know that? Anyway, I'm picking Bonfim to win by submission. I think I crashed out towards the end of that video, to be fair, but I will admit I am very tired. You know, guys, some people go out there and they do hard labor for 12 hours a day. I sit on my ass and study engineering for 12 hours a day. How about that, huh? Yeah, I don't know. I know it's not that difficult. I'm pretty aware of that, but yeah, that's it for the video. That was a mess. Hopefully, we can have another good card. I think I would consider last week to be a good enough card. I will just say, guys, be careful, though. The UFC potentially under a little bit of an investigation over that that fight that did happen between Del Valle and old mate whose name I've already forgotten. I'll see you guys in the next one.